94.9 and 99.1 The River is the radio station. Our Town is the program. The host is yours truly, Darren Swinson. The sponsor is Decorah Bank and Trust. We'll have three guests and two interviews on our program this morning. Coming up on March the 4th, the city of Decorah will be going to the polls, and they will be asked whether or not to authorize the city to pursue the possibility of a municipal electric utility. And we will break down that issue with the representatives from Alliant Energy and also break down that issue from the pro-MEU side of things as well. Again, our goal through this program and through this information and these interviews and these conversations is to have a well-informed electorate. We're not advocating one side or the other. We are going to allow people that support the research into an MEU and people that support the status quo. We are obligated to give them both sides and an opportunity to sell their case, and that's exactly what we are going to do on this morning's edition of Our Town. We will talk to Jim Martin-Schramm. He will offer the viewpoint of exploring the MEU, but we will start this program talking to Randy Bauer from Alliant Energy and local resident Harlan Satrom. They will present the viewpoint favoring the status quo when it comes to energy in the city of Decorah. Our conversation with Randy and Harlan is right now. This is Our Town. It's brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust, and you're listening to it on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. Coming up on May the 4th, the city of Decorah will go to the polls to decide whether or not to pursue the possibility of a municipal electric utility. And here to discuss that upcoming vote is Randy Bauer. He is the Director of Operational Resources from Alliant Energy and local Decorah businessman Harlan Satrom. And Randy, we will start with you from the Alliant perspective. What would be your primary concern if Decorah voters vote yes on March the 4th?
Yeah, so Darren, as we commissioned a feasibility study that was recently concluded and we released a couple weeks ago. And so if you look at the cost, the reality is our feasibility study says the citizens of Decorah would pay more for electricity under a municipal electric utility than they would by remaining with Alliant Energy. We're also very proud of the reliability and the service that we provide to the city. And we just don't believe a municipal utility can provide that same level of reliability and service.
Of course, Randy, I'm going to follow up with you. Some may say you're pointing out the study, so the numbers, can it really be trusted? Why should we trust the numbers you're putting out in that feasibility study?
Yeah, so Darren, there is a little bit of history with the Iowa Utilities Commission. Over the past 40 years or so, 6 utilities have attempted to create municipal electric utilities in the state of Iowa. They've all been denied by the Iowa Utilities Commission. We used the same methodology that was in those cases, so we used that same methodology. When you look at municipalization, investor-owned utilities in those contested cases have been someplace north of 90% accurate in our assumptions. So we feel that our study is very, very valid and very, very realistic.
Harlan, I'll go to you. What's wrong with the city exploring options when it comes to something as important as its energy future?
I don't think there's anything wrong with exploring options. So the vote is March 4th, and what folks are under the impression of is that as of March 4th, if we vote yes, then the city can ask Alliant Energy for whatever data or information they want. And the reality is that the yes vote starts the process, but you literally need to have gone far enough down the road and had a petition filed with the IUC. And then once that petition is filed and the IUC is trying to adjudicate whether the petition is valid or how it's going to work, that's the point that you actually get access to Alliance information. So people are being told that the vote is just to get the information, but it's a lot more than that, because the distance between voting and the actual filing of the petition, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of energy, the city would literally probably need to do its own feasibility study. And even back in 2018, their feasibility study showed that they would spend between $1 and $2 million just to get from point A to point B. And I mean, I was with Travis, the city manager, this morning, and there's nothing in the city budget that says, hey, we have money to have $1 million or $2 million available. There are funds available for that, but people aren't understanding that the MEU vote is not filing a petition.
But Harlan, I'll follow up with you. If this is something that is of interest to the majority of Decorah voters, what's wrong with starting that process?
Again, the vote just starts the process, but you have to be willing to invest a ton of time and energy and money to get to the point where you literally file the petition. And so the question really is, what is it that the city thinks they want to know that they actually don't have access to? Because the current feasibility study has all kinds of information and data that's very helpful in terms of understanding what the revenues are, in terms of understanding what the value of the infrastructure is. Those are numbers that are already known right now. There isn't anything to wait for. We know that. It's just that the city has chosen not to put together a feasibility study at this point based on those numbers.
And Randy, I'll go to you. The city and the pro-MEU folks regarding this vote say the city can't determine the specific costs of the municipal electric utility without that yes vote. You obviously say that isn't true. This is part of the challenge of this debate is reasonable-minded people who want to be informed and make a good decision moving forward are hearing polar opposite things. Why are you saying that this can be figured out prior to a vote?
Yeah. So Darren, there's a lot of, as Harlan noted, there's a lot of information in our feasibility study that gives details on numbers of customers we have in Decorah, dollars of revenue, system details, things like that. Even if, well, I guess what I'm saying here is I think there's enough information available for the city to directionally determine the feasibility of a municipal electric utility in Decorah.
And Harlan, we talked a little bit beforehand. You're, as a local citizen, concerned about the cost of pursuing this, even taking that next step. Based on your studies, based on your determination, does the city have the money to look at this?
Well, so the city has, so right now, Alliant is collecting a franchise fee from all of us in Decorah, and that franchise fee the last couple of years has been $390,000 a year. So 4% of our bills represent 390,000, which means that the total bill of Decorah people paying for electricity is just under $10 million. That's been a fairly constant figure the last 2 years. And then when you think about the cost of acquiring the system, that's the other number that the folks are saying, hey, we need to know how much the system would cost. Well, in the feasibility study that Alliant's doing, it's got the actual numbers, and then it's got a depreciated value for that. And so that value is like 31 million. But then you have to add in the new service center down here and the battery pack up at Venaheim. So you've got about 39 million of infrastructure plus 14 million of other assets that would be just the main part of acquiring that. And so that's $50 million of property that the city would be trying to buy. And so if you just look at the interest on issuing revenue bonds for $50 million, the interest is more than Alliant's making on us right now out of the 10 million of revenue that they've got.
Randy, I'll go to you. There have been concerns raised about Alliant Energy rate increases. According to my research, in the last 7 years, Alliant has increased their rates 2 times in that time. Are city residents justified in raising concerns about the rates that you charge your customers?
Yeah, so certainly, Darren, we understand concerns about cost, and nobody likes to raise rates. Just to put a little bit of this into perspective, electrical equipment that we buy over from 2017 to 2024, we've seen an 11% average annual 11% increase in the cost of products that we buy, transformers, poles, things like that. We've certainly seen costs increases in labor as well, and even the city, Darren, is not immune to price increases. As I look at water rates in Decorah, those have increased about double since 2012. So everybody has cost pressures on us, and I'm sure the city doesn't like to raise rates any more than we do. But that's the reality of the cost atmosphere we're in right now.
Just a quick comment on that. Just a quick comment, Darren.
Go ahead.
There actually is a 5-year rate moratorium right now. Alliant cannot raise rates right now until the lock is till 2020. So Alliant can't raise rates until 2030. Now the cost of getting the power here, the transmission costs and the fuel costs can be raised, but that's a pass through. But Alliant's rates are frozen for the next 5 years.
And following up with you, Randy, many say that MEU rates statewide are lower than what Alliant charges. Mid-American rates are lower than what you charge. What's your answer to that regarding the comparison of your rates versus other municipalities and other investor-owned utilities?
Yeah, that's a good question, Darren. I've always looked at rate comparisons as an interesting exercise, but it doesn't mean a heck of a lot because rates have to be set based on your cost of service. I think one thing that the proponents of an MEU are missing is the last municipal utility in Iowa was created in 1974. So they paid off any of that initial debt, any of that initial cost to either acquire that system or build that system. So none of that has to be baked into those current municipal utilities rates. Whereas if a Decorah municipal utility were to form, we estimate the debt service that the city would incur would amount to $109 a month per meter. And that's for the debt service.
One question I've asked in the past, and I haven't really gotten a clear answer on, and I'll ask you, Harlan, based on the research that you have done on this end of things. You look at city utilities, water and sewer primarily in Decorah. Those are enterprise funds, basically funds that you take in from the water and sewer department can only be used to improve and upkeep those departments. When it comes to a municipal electric utility, would that be an enterprise fund, or would that be something that could generate revenue for a general fund, or do you have that answer?
So the MEU actually has the right and the ability, if it's got an extra cash flow, the MEU, one of the biggest benefits of it potentially could be the money that it would pay to the city in lieu of, so it's basically a compensation back to the city.
Okay.
And so the projection of that would be something like in the past feasibility study that was there was $500,000 or $600,000 of that kind of revenue going from the utility, going back to the city for whatever it wanted to be used for. There are some restrictions on it, but the reality right now is that the franchise fee that Alliant is collecting, the real estate taxes that Alliant is paying, bottom line is that's almost $600,000 right now that the city is getting via the franchise fee and the real estate taxes. And in 2023, Alliant gave another $103,000 in assistance, charitable assistance from the foundation to the city in a variety of different projects, whether it was Sunflower or others. So literally, Alliant is providing $700,000 of value to the city through the franchise fee, real estate taxes, and the nonprofit donations it's making back.
Randy, you touched on this a moment ago. The last time the Iowa Utilities Commission approved a municipal electric utility was 1974. That was 51 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there is a climate that one could get approved now or not?
You know, Darren, I just don't know. The Utilities Commission looks at these things on an individual basis. They will weigh the evidence and make their determination. And so I just don't know until we file that case what it might look like.
Harlan, as a local community resident and a local community business person, in your mind, what's the biggest reason that Alliant needs to stay as the city's energy provider?
So Alliance rates that we're kind of talking about here are the individual ratepayer at 17 cents a kilowatt hour, but the commercial and the industrial ratepayers in Decorah are paying a lot less than that. And so literally, and we have 375 solar installations here in Decorah, which is way more. I mean, we've got almost 10% of this town that's solar, when most towns you struggle to even get 2%. So basically, there's the question of whether all these people that have solar are going to get net metering with an MEU, because it's expensive to offer net metering. So all the people that have solar, they're somewhat at risk, but all the businesses, Gemini and Deco and Stanley, all these businesses, the general thought is that their actual rates might go up in an MEU. And so we can't have our industrial commercial customers' rates going up, because that's going to be a detriment to business. And so, the other thing is that these rates we talk about being so high at 17 cents, you have to ask yourself, what do you get for those rates? You get 99.9% reliability. You get a new service center that the trucks are warm, and if they have got to go out in the middle of the winter, their hydraulics are ready to go. You've got linemen that are trained on the high voltage stuff that's here in Decorah. So it's not just the rate; it's what are we getting for what we're paying, and reliability is by far and away the biggest thing that everybody's concerned about, and it's pretty hard to improve on 99.9% reliability.
Harlan, I'll give you a chance for one final comment. Anything else you feel the public needs to know prior to the March 4th vote?
What's amazing to me is that, yes, Alliant, it's kind of a negotiation. If Alliant wants a rate increase, they're going to throw out a number. The IUC is going to come back and say, you know what, we're going to approve 75% of that, or whatever the number. But the rates that everybody's somewhat complaining about have actually been rates that are approved by the IUC, the very company or the very entity that's going to approve or disapprove the municipalization. I just find it fascinating that it's not just Alliant and their raising of rates arbitrarily. The IUC has approved every rate increase Alliant's ever had.
Randy, I'll give you a chance for one final comment on anything else that we haven't covered during this conversation that the public, in your mind, needs to know prior to March 4th.
Yeah, Darren, I appreciate that. We've been proud to serve Decorah for 100 plus years. We've got an excellent track record. As Harlan's noted, we've invested heavily in the community. We've got highly skilled people in a new operations center that are there 24/7, 365. We've got 200 people within 125 miles of Decorah. So if a major reliability event happens, we can have people there very quickly to respond. And I think the city's going down a dangerous and expensive path.
All right, there you hear that point of view. We thank local Decorah resident and businessman Harlan Satrom, as well as Randy Bauer, the Director of Operations for Alliant Energy, for joining us and discussing all of these issues prior to the March 4th MEU vote. The community of Decorah will go to the polls on March the 4th and will be asked to give the city the authority to potentially pursue a municipal electric utility. And here to discuss that issue is Jim Martin-Schramm. And Jim, explain your role in this whole process.
Sure, Darren. Thanks for the invitation to join you today. I serve as the chair of the Decorah Sustainability Commission, along with 8 other members of our community. We're all volunteers. I think it was in December, the City Council asked our commission to develop a MEU Citizen Education Initiative and to implement it. And so we have done that. Our job isn't to come up with information to share with the community, but rather simply to pass along the information that was prepared by the City Council and approved by the Iowa Ethics and Campaign Disclosure Board. So most folks who are residents of Decorah probably got the newspaper insert that was included with the Driftless Journal and with the Decorah Leader. Soon they will get a 4-page mailer via postal mail with the same content, the same 20 questions and answers. And then like a week before the election, they'll get a postcard saying, hey, remember to vote. So I'll draw on that information in my remarks this morning, but I'll also draw on, my own personal perspectives as a citizen of Decorah and as a policy analyst for the Clean Energy Districts of Iowa. I was an expert witness for SETI in the last rate case, and I served as an expert witness for the Decorah Area Group in the previous rate case. So I have a fair bit of background.
And to discuss this issue, I'll start with this question. Obviously, in May of 2018, this issue went before Decorah voters, and it was turned down by not even a handful of votes at that time, and that's not even a handful on one hand. What has changed? What has remained the same since that 2018 vote?
Sure, Darren. I'll try to address each of those questions. What has changed, and then what has stayed the same. So with regard to what has changed, I would say first, Alliant has sort of lost the trust of many or some, or if not many, of the residents of their customers in Decorah. And I say that because it became clear in the 2019 rate case that the company knew it intended to file another rate increase proposal at the end of 2018. But they didn't tell Concentric Energy Advisors that was doing their feasibility study that this was what they intended to do. And they certainly didn't tell the city council. I was there at the February 8 meeting or February 6 meeting in 2018. It was a significant rate increase. And so this matter was revealed to the Iowa Utilities Board during that rate case. And I want to read to you what the commission, what now the commission said. They changed their name from the Utilities Board to the Commission. They said the actions taken by Alliant Energy in opposition to the Decorah municipalization effort demonstrate a lack of management efficiency by withholding from and not providing to the citizens of Decorah accurate information about anticipated rate increases. Because a rate-regulated electric utility is a monopoly in its service territory, it has a duty to be transparent and to provide accurate information to customers and communities in that service territory. The evidence in this case regarding Alliant Energy's behavior during the Decorah municipalization campaign shows that Alliant Energy did not fulfill this responsibility and failed to meet the expected standard of conduct for a regulated monopoly. The lack of transparency and misrepresentation in the Decorah municipalization vote is of significant concern to the board. So that kind of information, I think, has led some folks in Decorah to be not necessarily to trust the company. Alliant told us in 2018 that our rates would go up 6% in 2018 because the board had just approved their most recent rate increase, and that our rates would go up 1% every year for the next 20 years. Our base rates have gone up a lot faster than that, which brings me to the second thing that has changed. So second, Alliant has proposed and received 2 record base rate increases since that referendum in May 1st, 2018. In 2019, Alliant filed for an 11.9% rate increase, and the Iowa Utilities Commission approved a 7.4% increase. In 2023, Alliant filed for a 16% increase, and the Utilities Commission approved a 10.5% increase. So if you take those 2 rate cases together with the one that was being resolved in 2018, over those 7 years, from 17 to 23, Alliant asked to raise base rates 3 times. They proposed a combined increase of 44.8%, which averages out to 6.4% per year. The Utilities Commission approved a 27.5% combined increase, which averages out to 4.1% per year. 4.1% per year is a lot more than 1% per year. So that's the second thing that has changed is all Alliant customers have experienced significant rate increases since the first referendum. Third, another thing that has changed is that in the most recent rate case, Alliant agreed to a settlement agreement, joined a settlement agreement that included a conditional 5-year moratorium on base rate increases. So that means they're not supposed to come back in for a rate increase until 2029. But I want to emphasize that this this is a conditional agreement, a conditional moratorium. They will stay out so long as they get their 9.65% guaranteed blended authorized return on equity. And the other thing too, so if they don't, they'll be back in for a rate case. Some of the stuff happening in Washington right now is imperiling some of the revenue that the company expects to receive from its 400 megawatts of solar and its repowering of some of its wind turbines. In addition, it's a base rate moratorium, which only applies to about 70% of a residential customer's bill. There are other charges that flow through automatically, and the biggest one is transmission. Transmission costs have been going up at over 5% a year from 2017 to 2023. So yes, they have signed, that has changed. They've signed a base rate moratorium, but it's conditional on them earning their profit. And B, there are additional costs that are going to get passed through. So what has stayed the same? Well, Alliant has refused to furnish the city of Decorah with the information it needs to produce an accurate feasibility study, despite the fact that it just released an updated feasibility study that presumably draws on this information. The city has requested this information on multiple occasions over the last 8 years. Second, Alliant's residential ratepayers are paying nearly the highest rates in Iowa and some of the highest rates in the Midwest. Alliant's commercial customers are paying a rate that puts them in the top third of Iowa's most expensive electric utilities. Second, what has stayed the same? Alliant, sorry, that was it. I didn't turn the page.
And you talk about Alliance rates, and nobody likes paying high rates for anything. I mean, we all agree with that. There's been many concerns raised about the rates that Alliant charges. Are there any other concerns other than rates that Alliant that you have with Alliant and the service that they provide?
Concerns about are there other concerns? Well, one is that Alliant is required by law to offer energy efficiency programs to all their customers. But they have supported legislative efforts that have radically reduced Iowa's requirements of rate-regulated utilities with regard to energy efficiency. Cut it basically in half. Second, Alliant is required by law to offer net metering to their solar customers. But the company has opposed net metering in the past, and in 2027, there's a law that says the state will replace net metering with something called a value of solar methodology. And I fully expect the company to argue for the lowest value of solar possible. So I think those are two things that should be of significant concern. The extent to which the company really wants to support energy efficiency and net metering, because in fact, both of those result in lost sales to the company.
A yes vote on March 4th would allow the city to explore the possibilities of forming an MEU, and that exploration process will take money. Why is that exploration process worth taxpayer investment?
Sure. Alliant, I haven't seen the revenue. They haven't provided the revenue information to the city per the city's request. But if you look at the 4% franchise fee, you can sort of ballpark how much money is leaving Decorah, and that's around just under $10 million a year. About 10% of that is to provide the company with their guaranteed return on equity for their shareholders. So there's at least $1 million that presumably a nonprofit would have to work with, in addition to just being more efficient with the other costs. I mean, why rent when you can own? I think is one of the arguments that I've heard that I think kind of summarizes things fairly well. If you look at residential customers, and there are probably, I don't know, 3,200, 3,300 residential customers in Decorah. The Clean Energy Districts of Iowa every year analyzes the annual electric utility reports. And, Alliance costs are higher than all but two of the other 180 electric utilities, which means that a residential customer served by any of those other utilities is going to be saving money. If you just sort of throw a dart at the middle, I mean, you're looking at a savings for residential customers around maybe $500, $400 a year. Well, you multiply that by 3,200 households, and pretty soon you're talking about millions of dollars that are being recycled in the local economy because Decorah ratepayers are paying less. The same thing is true to a lesser degree for commercial property owners, the folks on Water Street, the businesses on Water Street, or our churches, or our nonprofits. Those tend to be under that commercial rate. There are fewer of them, only about 500 in the city of Decorah, but they too could see annual savings of up to $1,000, depending on which utility you're comparing them with, and all of that money could get recycled in the local economy. So I think there are good reasons to explore options. I don't know if it will be feasible for the city of Decorah to financially operate a municipal electric utility. But if I were an elected member of the city council, I would be interested in exploring options because, as I said, every Alliant ratepayer in the state of Iowa, every residential ratepayer is paying really high costs for their electricity. And so if there's a way to provide Decorah ratepayers with less expensive electricity, why wouldn't you want to pursue that?
I'm going to follow up on one thing you had mentioned earlier regarding the Alliant rates and the transmission costs that have, I believe, quoting you accurately, said they've gone up about 5% per year. Wouldn't that transmission cost still be that high with an MEU because the power has to get to the city in one way or another? Wouldn't that cost be the same?
That is a great question, Darren. And yes, if the city of Decorah were to receive high voltage transmission service from ITC Midwest, which is the entity that provides transmission service for Alliant customers in Decorah, then yeah, it'd be the same amount of money. Just the MEU would have to spread it out the same way Alliant passes that cost through. The thing that's a little unique about Decorah is we actually have two high voltage transmission service providers. So Dairyland Power Group brings high voltage transmission into the Decorah substation. In part, that's because, right, My Energy, which is a distribution cooperative of the Dairyland Power Group, receives its electricity from Dairyland. And so that electricity comes in and then goes out to the My Energy customers that are on the, west side and the east side of Decorah. The Decorah Business Park, I don't think people know this, but the Decorah Business Park is powered by My Energy. It's not powered by Alliant Energy. So anyway, there is an alternative for an MEU, possibly, to take receive high voltage transmission service from Dairyland. Now, I don't have those exact numbers right now. My recollection is they are less than Alliance, but I wouldn't say they're like half or even 25% less than Alliant. But that's a great question that you ask.
And asking just about the structure of an MEU, because when it comes to city-owned utilities like water and sewer, basically the funds raised from the water and the sewer funds can only be put towards those two entities. Would an MEU operate in the same way as that, or would it be any different? And if it is different, how so?
I don't think I can speak definitively about this, but my answer at this point would be that yes, a Decorah municipal electric utility would be constrained in the same way that the city's water and sewer utility would be constrained, and that is that the revenue from ratepayers would have to be used to either reduce costs. If there's significant profit, then you could reduce costs to those ratepayers going forward, or you have to recycle those dollars into system improvements for the electric distribution system. And then third, another basic operating expense for MEUs is payment in lieu of taxes. And so, the MEU would be using these enterprise funds for that purpose as well. And then finally, a legitimate use of these funds is to support economic development opportunities in the community that could presumably result in increased electricity sales going forward. And so, I would say that's also relevant to other kind of public works facilities. In some communities around the nation, the MEU also provides free electric service to the city-owned buildings, not to my house or to your house, but to the city itself. So that's another way that funds can be used. That answer your question?
Yes. I've just kind of wondered about, since it's city-owned, would it operate the same way as water and sewer? Because that would be an assumption on my end of things, but we all know what assuming does. So,
yeah,
to be fair.
Yeah.
But you've touched on the information that the city would like to get as compared to the city in the information it has now related to moving forward and deciding its energy future. What would a yes vote on March 4th? What information could the city get then that they can't get now?
Right. So you may remember that after the failed referendum, the city decided to establish a municipal electric utility task force and to study the pros and the cons of establishing an MEU. That group met for 2 years and ultimately unanimously recommended that the city hold another referendum. I believe it was during the work of the task force that the city filed a complaint with the Utilities Board asking the board to require Alliant to furnish the city with detailed asset information, how many poles, how many transformers, how many miles of underground wire, how many miles of overground substation investments, etc. A very detailed list of assets, as well as information about, well, what's your trend line in terms of sales and what's your trend line in terms of operating costs. And so the city filed a complaint, asked the board to mandate that, and yada, yada, yada. At the end, the board said, well, we've looked at the law, and as much as we sympathize with your request for this information by law, we agree with Alliant that they are not compelled to provide this information to you unless or until you have a positive referendum and you submit a petition to take over Alliant service territory in Decorah. And once you do that, once you submit that petition and it becomes a docket at the Iowa Utilities Board, well, then it kind of becomes a legal proceeding. And, in any kind of lawsuit, both parties have the capacity for discovery. And so it'd be during that period of discovery where the city of Decorah could request the detailed information it wants. I know Alliant has been saying and pointing to that same order in response to the complaint that, hey, nothing stops the city of Decorah from doing its own feasibility study like Decorah Power did back in 1718. But the reality is that study was based on estimates and assumptions. And I totally agree with the city council that it would be a waste of taxpayer money to invest in a feasibility study that's just based on estimates and assumptions. You want real numbers, right? And presumably those numbers exist because Alliant just released its updated study from Concentric that has all sorts of numbers in it. And presumably, those numbers for asset acquisition are based on number of poles, number of miles of wire, etc. So the numbers are there. But the companies just made it very clear they're not going to provide it unless they're forced to. And so, unfortunately, that's the kind of position we're in.
As you very well know, there are residential customers outside of the city limits who are in the Decorah Alliance service area. There's also those that live in the rural areas that own businesses in the community, and those people obviously can't express their opinion by voting on this matter. What is your message to them?
Yeah, and if I were in their position, I would be frustrated. That said, I mean, when I moved here, I didn't have a choice. I couldn't choose to have Mid-American supply me with electricity, which I would much prefer because their cost is 11 cents per kilowatt hour and Alliance is almost 18 cents a kilowatt hour. Big difference. But I didn't have a choice because Alliant has monopoly service territory. So for those that are just outside of the city limits, or even inside, on the west side here, the homes along Valley View Drive, I think, are served by My Energy. They didn't have a choice in terms of My Energy servicing them either. So it's just it's a frustrating aspect of living in a state that regulates the electric utilities in the way it does. But I get it. I would be frustrated too if I were them. The only thing I can say, and this applies for the residents of Decorah as much as it applies to the folks who live or work or have businesses in Freeport, or are on farms that are just a little bit outside of the city limits on the east and the west side. All I can say is the Iowa Utilities Commission will not approve any petition by the city of Decorah to take over Alliant service territory. The only way they will approve it is if they determine it is in the public's interest to be served by a Decorah MEU. And so presumably if that's the case, then those customers should be better off. And it won't be because the city of Decorah says so, it'll be because the Iowa Utilities Commission says so.
Speaking of the Iowa Utilities Commission, they have not approved a municipal electric utility since 1974. I believe it was Aurelia, if I'm not mistaken, at that time, based on my research. Do you believe the environment is there for the IUC to approve one for the first time in 51 years?
There was another case, and I can't remember if it was, I think it started in 2006 and then concluded maybe in 2008. Of another half a dozen communities. I think the largest, I don't remember the name, but I think the largest had less than 2,000 citizens. Unfortunately, you can't get into all the documents because the Utilities Board went to an electronic filing system in 2009, and so all of the documents from that case are earlier. But I do have the final decision in order, and I have the 100-page or 96-page memo from staff to the board outlining all of the issues. And my 10,000-foot read of it was, the order read, and basically, you didn't make your case that this would be in the financial best interests of your citizens. Secondly, you didn't appeal to other factors besides lower rates. And it kind of reads like a roadmap to how you could have gotten the board's approval. But of course, that board changes, right? I mean, these are 3 people appointed by the governor for staggered 4-year terms, some of which are reappointed, some of which leave to take jobs in industry. But in general, these orders are sort of precedent setting. And so as I read the most recent rate case, it read like a roadmap for how you could get our agreement. But I would say the other main thing from that 06-08 case was that these communities hadn't done their homework. They had preliminary discussions with a municipal utility nearby or an REC, a rural electric cooperative nearby. They talked about how to acquire power on the wholesale market, but they didn't have any contracts. They didn't have anything in writing. And so one of the things that's really different this time around is My Energy is publicly out there and saying, to the extent the city of Decorah wants us to help them, we will do that. Now, they're not going to do it for free, but if you need us to service your lines for 6 months, 9 months, 18 months, 3 years, let's talk about it. If you want to have access to wholesale markets through the Dairyland Power Group and their high voltage transmission service, that's fine. Let's talk about it. If you want to just buy wholesale power and have Dairyland wheel it to you through their high voltage lines, that's fine. We can talk about it. Well, both My Energy and Dairyland Power Group are sophisticated, well-run electric utilities. And any partnership between the city of Decorah and either of those entities is, I think, going to be confidence inspiring for the Iowa Utilities Commission. They want to be sure the lights come on in Decorah, and especially right now, I just heard my heat kick in. We have a natural gas boiler, but it's electric pumps that push that water around my house. So, the electricity's got to be reliable. And that's going to be top of mind for the Iowa Utilities Commission.
And related to that, two more questions for you, Jim. Why is the structure of an MEU more feasible for the city of Decorah than the structure of an investor-owned utility?
I don't know if feasible is the right word there. For example, there are two investor-owned utilities in Iowa that provide electricity, Mid-American and Alliant. There are 41 or 42 rural electric cooperatives that provide electricity. And then there are 135 municipal electric utilities. There are, I don't know, I think it's about 80 MEUs up in Minnesota, about 60 over in Wisconsin. So if you're talking about feasibility, well, it's pretty clear. You got, over 200 MEUs doing just fine in their states, in the three-state region. And what that tells me is there should be plenty of expertise when the city decides to hire a general manager or needs to go out and, hire the leadership for an MEU. I think there's going to be plenty of folks out there that can do it. I think the other difference is that an MEU is accountable to the ratepayers in the municipality. Whereas right now, if you're an Alliant ratepayer, well, you're sort of subject to the management decisions of Alliant's executive leadership in Madison, Wisconsin, and you're susceptible to the regulatory decisions of the Iowa Utilities Commission in Des Moines. Well, in this case, you would know exactly who to talk to because it's either going to be the city council or it's going to be a board that's appointed by the city council to manage the municipal electric utility. And so in terms of accountability for cost control, well, you can't get much closer than being able to drive down to City Hall or calling your city council member and saying, hey, what's going on here? So I would say, that accountability matter doesn't necessarily address feasibility, but feasibility simply means, is it possible? And all I'm trying to say is, well, yeah, look around you. Periodically, Karen and I drive up to Rochester for one reason or another. Well, I don't know that many people know that Rochester is served by a municipal electric utility. Spring Valley is served by a municipal electric utility. Ames, Cedar Falls, New Hampton, there are lots of them all around us. It's definitely feasible.
Final question, and I think you probably answered a little bit of it with the previous answer, but why is an MEU the best option for Decorah's energy future?
Well, I think it might be too soon to answer that question. The whole point of this referendum is to get the legal standing we need to get the information we need to figure out whether it's the best option for us. But having said that, the energy sector, especially the electricity sector, is changing rapidly. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think it's possible that a Decorah MEU could help us secure lower transmission cost, purchase wholesale power at a lower cost, purchase a larger percentage of green power compared to Alliant, purchase some power locally, partner with My Energy to service our lines, at least for the startup period, to develop an aggressive energy efficiency and what's called demand response program, because every electron that you conserve or use more efficiently is an electron you don't have to buy on the market. So it can save you a lot of money to encourage your ratepayers to invest in efficiency and demand response. And finally, I think we could partner with owners of solar systems for mutual benefit. And exactly what that'll look like is not something, it's not an answer I can provide right now, because you have to wait until you actually have a MEU established, and you have to have a board and blah blah blah. But I think all of those factors are could result in a better option for Decorah.
Jim, appreciate the time and the information. Thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thank you, Darren.
Jim Martin-Schramm discussing the upcoming municipal electric utility vote in the city of Decorah. We want to thank Randy Bauer and Harlan Satrom for joining us and offering their viewpoints on favoring the status quo when it comes to Decorah's energy future. And we want to thank Jim Martin-Schramm for joining us and offering the viewpoint of the pro-MEU side of things. Again, our goal is to not advocate one side or the other. Our goal is to have a well-informed electorate, and that's why we had these conversations this morning. And the city of Decorah will have an opportunity to vote on this issue March the 4th, absentee balloting available at the Wenatchee County Auditor's Office through March the 3rd. Don't forget, we put these shows on YouTube each and every week. We realize you're busy. You can't always be near a radio or near a smart speaker at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning. But we get to talk to interesting people on this morning, important issues, and we want to bring these conversations to you on your schedule. If you're out on YouTube, go to 220 Our Town program. Great way to find it. And we also put the links up on all of our LA Communications Facebook pages as well. It's the best way that we try to do our best to keep in touch with you, our communities, because without you, none of this makes sense. Thanks to our guests, thanks to our sponsor, Decorah Bank and Trust, and we thank you, that's right, you, for tuning in, for logging on, or for watching Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 The River.